Who's rising and who's falling in the latest ADP? Let's find out. Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on Monday, March 3rd. I am Frank Stampfl, joined by Scott White. Today on the show, we have a lot of updates from the weekend. That's the time of year, Scott. It's spring training. We've got Statcast data to look at. There's injuries constantly popping up. So there's a lot to talk about. ADP.
There's a lot to talk about. I was just complaining to you. That's all I do is complain to you about I can't keep up with all the new. There's so much I want to read because I tell everybody before spring training one of the things you want to pay attention to is everything that's being said by managers and players, stuff they've worked on, etc. There's so much to read, but not enough hours in the day to read it. And I don't know how that seems to be more true with each passing year because I don't remember it being so hard to keep up with before. Maybe I'm just I'm always trying to do more, I guess is probably the reason. But yeah, it's hard to keep up with it all. So we'll try to consolidate to the most important things for you here on Fantasy Baseball today. And obviously Chris has a couple of articles he's following along with the spring news that he runs every week, a couple of articles. So he's doing that there as well. And so hopefully you don't have to spend so much time on it because it's a lot.
That's why I'm here, Scott. I moonlight as Scott's therapist here before and after the podcast.
Yeah, that's it.
We've also got ADP risers and fallers and a big weekend of drafts as well. We had the labor industry auctions. That's the League of Alternative Baseball Reality. I was in the NL only and Chris was in the AL only. So we don't talk a lot about mono leagues here, but we figured give you guys some due. For those who do play in AL and NL only, we'll take a quick look at our teams later on in the show. Let's jump right in, Scott, and get to some of the headlines from the weekend. And cross your fingers. Hope everything's all right here because Corbin Carroll was removed Sunday due to lower back tightness. He said he's not concerned. He's looking to rejoin the lineup as soon as Wednesday of this week. And he was off to a blistering start this spring training, Scott. So hope all is well there with Corbin Carroll. Have you seen or read anything else? Are you concerned at all?
Well, they don't sound concerned, so I'm not especially concerned. Of course, sometimes injuries that turn out to be pretty serious don't seem that way at first. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't make sense to flip out based on what they're saying. Back tightness, I think he's supposed to sit out Monday, and then they have a day off Tuesday, and so they hope he's back Wednesday. And if he's back Wednesday, that means it's probably nothing to worry about.
Yep. Some more likely actionable news here with Luis Gil, who was pulled from his bullpen on Friday due to shoulder tightness and got an MRI on Saturday. I did not get an update or see an update on that MRI, by the way. But Luis Gil is someone who barely pitched in both 2022 and 2023, then went all the way up over 150 innings last season. And that was a bit of a cause for concern there. And I guess from a Yankees perspective, good thing they held on to Marcus Stroman as of now, but not great news here for Luis Gil, Scott.
Yeah, supposedly he's already had the MRI, but they're not going to reveal the results till Monday. Aaron
Yankees
Boone
are so weird with like how they handle and talk about injuries.
Yeah, Aaron Boone said he thinks it's going to be something that costs him some time, which I'd interpret as meaning not a small amount of time. And keepers just were finalized in one league, and I was on the fence about keeping Luis Gil. It's a pretty deep league. I was on the fence about keeping him. I decided to keep him, and then this happened.
I
tried to get out of it. Tried to say, can I just drop him? I don't want to keep him anymore. I don't need a replacement keeper. I just want to drop him.
And we were in trade talks, right? What was that, score sheet?
Yeah, I was in score sheet.
Yeah.
I was refused, Frank. I was refused. It's okay.
Yeah. So speaking of ADP risers, my guess is Luis Gil will fall down quite a bit, and rightfully so. As we learn more information, we'll let you know. But it sounds like he could start the season on the IL, and that would get Marcus Stroman into the Yankees rotation to start the year. Spencer Steer could also begin the season on the injured list. He received a cortisone injection in his right shoulder following an evaluation from team doctors, and that could open up some more playing time for someone like Christian Encarnacion Strand early on, who I believe already has 2 home runs in the spring. So off to a nice start there, but some worrisome news here for Spencer Steer. Scott, have you lowered or plan to lower him in your rankings?
Yes, I plan to lower him. I am overdue for an adjustment. I've got a list here of adjustments I need to make. Hopefully I'll get around to that tomorrow. And I will put Spencer Steer, probably drop him out of that tier entirely, that very big next best things tier at first base. I'll probably put him down in the following tier with Michael Tolia and Luis Ariz. And I wasn't excited about getting him anyway. He's on my busts, in my busts for this year, Spencer Steer. But if the discount is steep enough, I'll take a shot on him because it doesn't sound like a long-term thing.
Mm-hmm. And just looking at our top 300 rankings right now in Roto, you have Spencer Steer 97th, and I have him 141st. I didn't realize I was so much lower on Spencer Steer. So
that's pre-update for the injury.
That's pre-update, yeah. So yeah. I'll probably move him down a little bit more than that, maybe outside the top like 150 or so. But maybe it's not necessary because I had him really low to begin with. But that wasn't really a conscious decision to have him. I knew I was lower than
sometimes
on him, but not that.
Sometimes the combined ranking is just a case of you overvaluing or undervaluing a particular position, yeah. And so that's why a lot of times I like to cite where I rank him at a position as opposed to overall. But in any case, yeah, Spencer Steer's moving down.
Dodgers catcher Will Smith told reporters Saturday that he's been dealing with a bone bruise in his left ankle since last June and currently still dealing with, not that he's past it or anything. So, Scott, any concern with Will Smith? Do you plan to lower him at all? Is there any optimism or any more optimism for Dalton Rushing, who is a big prospect in the organization? Maybe he can work in a little bit more if they choose to use him as like a backup catcher. But what do you think here on the Dodgers catcher situation?
Well, the ranking is already so pessimistic. February ADP on NFBC, Will Smith is 7th among catchers, which is just before the big teardrop where you go to Shea Langoliers. Maybe you put Shea Langoliers in the same tier as Will Smith. I think he's a tier lower all by himself, but in a separate tier. So Will Smith is already at the bottom of the tier. And that's kind of surprising to me because I feel like I've been a Will Smith detractor for a few years now, and the industry as a whole just wasn't budging on him being, this tip-top catcher. And this seems to be the year finally they are budging, putting him 7th on average. And I think I had him like 5th originally. I got with the program. I put him 7th because it's not like I'm a Will Smith apologist. And this news, it's funny because he's been dealing with it since June. You look at his splits during the year. That's kind of when his season tanked.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you the breakdown here. Actually, it began in May 1st. I have the number from May 1st on. Will Smith hit 216 with a 708 OPS. And so the injury happened in June. Maybe he was just slumping in May and then the injury happened. He says he doesn't feel like it messed up his swing, but the numbers suggest otherwise. And Dave Roberts feels like it did mess up his swing and he's still dealing with it. So that's a little concerning. Not concerning enough for me to drop him beyond 7th, but concerning enough that I'm not necessarily like, I guess it's really the playing time thing, right? Because they did talk about how he might need more off days to compensate for this. You brought up the opportunity for Dalton Rushing. I don't think he's in line to make the major league roster, but you would think there could be a role there given his exposure to left field at AAA last year as sort of a hybrid backup catcher who plays, I don't know, 35% of the time behind the plate and then gets starts another third of the time in the outfield. That would seem like a possibility at some point. I don't know that outside of NL only leagues it's worth acting on at this point, but I've been wondering how Rushing is going to get his opportunity, and this may be the opening for him.
Yeah, I could see deeper 2-catcher leagues, even mixed formats like 15-team Roto. I have Dalton Rushing as my 27th ranked catcher. So in a 15-team league, he could be a back-end name if he has a role early on in the season. Obviously, if you draft him and he's not on the roster, you can't really use him or have him in your starting lineup. But yeah, I think in deeper 2-catcher leagues, Dalton Rushing is a name that should be on your radar, and we'll see if, any positive reports come out about him. Giancarlo Stanton will begin the season on the IL after receiving PRP injections in both of his elbows, both of his elbows. I just don't even know how this happened. And apparently it was something he was dealing with dating back to last year. And then he had that huge postseason. So we didn't really think he was dealing with anything, but he's a DH. Like, how did he hurt his elbows? Like, what did he do? It's just
too much flipping tires, Frank.
Yeah.
Remember that was his workout program. Everybody was freaking out because, we can flip tires.
Yeah.
As if that's a transferable baseball skill. I don't know. Maybe it is. What do I know? I'm just a baseball analyst.
Yeah. Not like you need to bench press 5 billion pounds, Giancarlo Stanton, whatever you're doing. But he's banged up. The elbows are a problem. And it seems like there could be a role for someone at DH to start the season. Ben Rice is off to a nice start so far in spring. Maybe he's a strong side platoon. They could also choose to go with Trent Grisham in the outfield with Jason Dominguez at DH because he's had his troubles playing in the field. So a couple different options there. Not that they're great. There was also some whispers that the Yankees have been in contact with JD Martinez. So we'll see if anything comes of that. Parker Meadows has been shut down after being diagnosed with a nerve issue in his right upper arm. And bad news for Meadows. I had him as a sleeper this year. I thought a little bit of power, some speed there. Tigers have a lot of injuries right now. Matt Vierling also will not be ready for opening day due to a strained right rotator cuff muscle. So, issues with the Tigers. I read last week that Wenzel Perez could have more of a role in their outfield to start the season. Manny Machado was scratched Friday due to back tightness. He's expected to return on Tuesday. Gunnar Henderson was pretty sore on Friday, did not play at all this weekend. Hopefully he's good this upcoming week. We'll learn more there. Chris Cotillo, who covers Cotillo, who covers the Red Sox for MassLive.com, said Rafael Devers should start the season at DH. Could start the season at DH with Alex Bregman at third and Christian Campbell at second. Devers is still working his way back from shoulder issues, and this is only one beat writer's opinion, Scott. It's not like Alex Cora has said this is going to happen, but it is still a possibility. So
that is how I'm reading between the lines as well, because Alex Bregman keeps playing third base in spring training, and it does seem like they're motivated to give Christian Campbell a chance. Now, I will point out Christian Campbell has yet to get a hit this spring. He's 0 for 12, and I imagine he'll have to show something. There's still weeks to go.
On Friday, he went 0 for 4 with 4 strikeouts.
Right. There's still weeks to go, so he could heat up and make that a non-issue. But I do believe that's what the Red Sox actually want to happen. They're not sure Devers is going to be in any physical state to play third base, and they're not really looking forward to his defense there, even if he is. And another detail I saw from this weekend that would also seem to support this idea is Masataka Yoshida was back in the lineup playing DH. He's coming back from rotator cuff surgery. He's only throwing from 45 feet. So he's not ready to play the outfield yet. His arm isn't prepared for that, but he's able to DH. There was a suggestion, though, that if he's not ready to play the outfield by the time the season starts, he's likely to begin the year in the minors, on the IL.
And that's Yoshida you're talking about.
That's Yoshida. So they don't want that sounds like they're reserving the DH spot for somebody else, right? If they're not willing to let Yoshida play through it. They are willing to let him play through it at DH in the spring, but they're not willing to during the regular season. Yeah, I think, again, Campbell has to show something. Maybe if he doesn't, they just go with David Hamilton or Vaughn Grissom at second base. They have other options, but it does sound to me like Devers is more likely to begin the year at DH than third base, and Bregman would begin it at third base.
All right, some other quick headlines to get through here from the weekend. Jacob deGrom will make his spring training debut this Friday. The Orioles are hopeful Felix Bautista will make his spring training debut on Monday. Justin Steele could incorporate more changeups this season after throwing that pitch just 3% of the time last year. Trevor McGill made his spring debut Friday after being slowed by an unspecified injury early in camp. Cubs top prospect Matt Shaw made his spring debut Sunday after being slowed by an oblique injury early on in camp. I believe he went 0 for 3 in that game. Jackson Holliday said he wants to steal 20-plus bases this season, already has 2 steals in 5 spring games. The Cardinals have reassigned pitching prospect Quinn Matthews to minor league camp, which was expected as long as they don't make any trades, which they haven't so far, and nobody is hurt. They actually have a lot of depth at starting pitcher, so that is a strength for the Cardinals going into the year. But obviously, pitchers get hurt, or as other teams' pitchers get hurt, maybe the Cardinals look to trade from a position of strength. Javier Assad will begin the season on the IL. One of Colin Ray, Jordan Wicks, and Ben Brown will be the Cubs' 5th starter to open the season. Michael Garcia will get time in center field this spring as the Royals want to add another option to their outfield mix. And
it also sounds like in conjunction with that, Jonathan India is going to play a lot of third base for the Royals. So you can anticipate him picking up eligibility there. I don't know that it'll be on an everyday basis, but I've seen him play there a couple times this spring already. Mm-hmm. And that's part of the incentive for giving Michael Garcia some time at center.
Yeah, I think the Royals like Michael Massey quite a bit, so they still want to get him at bats, and the way to do that is Massey at second, India at third, and Michael Garcia in the outfield, or some combination of Michael Garcia at third, India at DH, whatever it might be. DJ LeMahieu also tweaked his calf on Saturday. Aaron Boone described the situation as, quote, at least a little concerning. Oswaldo Cabrera seems like the favorite as of now to start at third base, although I believe Oswald Peraza is also battling it out for that job. Let's take a quick break. When we return, we'll take a look at some StatCast data from this weekend. We'll do that right after this.
Gives it to Jenkins for the championship. A 16 beats a 1. From sweet to elite to the Final Four.
Welcome back in Fantasy Baseball today. Lots to get to from the weekend. Want to go over some StatCast data, and I do just want to provide a little context and a reminder for people that don't overreact to this stuff, right? Like, I am bringing it up just because it's things that I notice, and I want to inform the listener of what's happening, if there's any velocity or pitch mix changes. But just because I say someone's velocity is up 2 miles per hour in 2 or 3 innings of work, don't completely change your mindset or your opinion of a player. It's just a little bit added context and things to learn throughout spring training. So from Friday, like only Shohei Ohtani could, he homered in his very first at-bat of the spring. It's not StatCast related, but definitely worth mentioning.
And a lot of people clipped that me saying on the last show that if Shohei Ohtani in his spring debut Friday hit a home run, I might have to rethink my decision to take Bobby Witt first in TGFBI, which begins Monday.
Oh, yeah.
So he did that. He homered in his first game. And I did rethink it. I'm sticking with Bobby Witt.
Yeah.
I don't know that I want to get into why. Maybe it'll come up naturally over the course of this podcast, but I did rethink it. I mean, clearly Shohei Ohtani has the higher ceiling in all 5 categories, I would say. And maybe not batting average, but the other 4 for sure. I'm sticking with Witt.
All right. I'm going to run through the rest of these pitchers, Scott, and then you can react to whoever you want to after that. But Garrett Cole made his debut on Friday, 3 innings, 1 run, 5 strikeouts. He really emphasized the changeup. His curveball velocity was down 3.4 miles per hour. His slider was down 1.7 miles per hour compared to last year. Yusei Kikuchi threw a new sweeper 10 times out of 47 pitches. It only had 1 whiff. Zebby Matthews of the Twins threw 3 shutout innings with 5 strikeouts. His velocity was up 1 to 1.5 miles per hour on all of his pitches. He had 6 whiffs on 40 pitches, has looked really good so far in 2 spring starts. Jesus Luzardo, 2 shutout innings in his Phillies debut on Friday. His velocity was up across the board. Fastball up 1.4 miles per hour. The slider, changeup, and sinker all up over 2 miles per hour, which is a great sign for Jesus Luzardo. Reese Olson, 2 innings, 2 runs, 2 strikeouts. His velocity was up as well. Sinker up nearly 2 miles per hour. Changeup nearly 3 miles per hour. Brandon Sproat, the prospect for the Mets, 2 shutout innings. He averaged 97 on his fastball and got all the way up to 99 miles per hour on that pitch. Ian Anderson and Grant Holmes both threw 3 shutout innings on Friday. Sandy Alcantara threw 2 shutout with 3 strikeouts. Scott, you were there in person.
I was.
It was a pretty important one. You got to see some pretty awesome pitchers, and Sandy averaged 99.1 on his fastball.
Yeah, I would say he looked good. However, the only regular in the Braves lineup was Sean Murphy, which was a disappointment to my wife and me. But But yeah, the velocity was there for Sandy Alcantara. It's not so much effectiveness I worry about with him. I think he'll be effective. It's just over how many innings, because workload was such a big part of his value. He was a guy who could give you 8 innings any time out. Back prior to Tommy John surgery, back when he was winning Cy Youngs. That's not going to happen his first year back from Tommy John surgery. And the Marlins are terrible. And he hasn't ever been a big strikeout guy, right at or maybe a little over a strikeout per inning. But he's probably going to, relative to the pitchers you could draft at the same point, there's a good chance he underwhelms in strikeouts, certainly in wins. ERA should be good. So do with that information what you will.
Couple other pitchers with Statcast data from Friday. Cody Bradford, 3 shutout innings with 3 strikeouts. His velo was up 1.5 to 2 miles per hour on all 4 of his pitches. Chris Bubich, 2 shutout with 4 strikeouts. He had 8 whiffs on 28 pitches. Merrill Kelly, 2 shutout innings with 2 strikeouts. His velocity up 1 to 1.5 miles per hour on all of his pitches. And Michael Soroka, 3 hitless innings with 3 strikeouts for the Nationals. His velocity was up, fastball up 1.4. He had 6 whiffs on 39 pitches. So, Scott, lots of names here. Is there anyone in particular you want to just quickly mention? Soroka, Merrill Kelly, Chris Bubich, Sproat, Reese Olson, Luzardo, Zebby Matthews, Kikuchi, Garrett Cole.
So, yes, there are a few things here I want to point out. Let's start with late round targets. A trio of pitchers who've gotten some attention as exciting late round targets and have so far lived up to it this spring. Cody Bradford. I wasn't even counting on the increased velocity, but if that's a thing, and he might have better strikeout potential, he might come closer to actually living up to a Bailey Ober comp instead of just a poor man's Bailey Ober. And meanwhile, Kumar Rocker has just gotten knocked around this spring. So I don't think it's much of a competition. I think the job is basically Bradford's. And I've already been motivated to use a late round pick on him. I stay motivated to use a late round pick on him. Chris Bubich isn't as certain to claim the 5th starter job for the Royals, but so far he's doing what he needs to do. He's getting whiffs on his fastball specifically. I know the changeup was a big part of his breakthrough. Remember, just before the Tommy John surgery, it was only like a couple of turns. Then he had Tommy John surgery, came back in the bullpen, showed that same stuff, looked great, missed a lot of bats. He's doing what he needs to do, and I am very likely to include him in some sleeper article the rest of this draft season. Michael Soroka, the big increase in strikeouts he saw after the White Sox moved him to the bullpen, a lot of that was him gaining velocity on his fastball. Yes, throwing it harder, which so far has continued into this spring, throwing a lot more sliders. That was the big whiff pitch for him. It's continued so far. Small sample, but it's continued. It's been a continuation of what we saw at the end of last season, which seemed out of left field and seemed hard to take seriously. But if he remains that guy through spring training, I think a lot of people are sleeping on Michael Soroka. So that's that one. I was also really surprised how many bats Garrett Cole missed. It was really encouraging to see how many bats. Of course, he's no stranger to that, but it wasn't something he did at his usual rate last season. And he was leaning on this changeup that hasn't been a big part of his arsenal in the past. His quote is, it's a long road of mastery for me with that pitch. It's been fun to tinker with it and get comfortable with the grip. Now it's about the consistency and how I maintain the arm speed and location. I thought it had both of those qualities tonight, so it's encouraging. He threw that changeup 33% of the time. It was his most thrown pitch. He threw it only 4% of the time last year. And I mentioned the number of bats Garrett Cole missed, 9 whiffs on 46 pitches. That's a huge swinging strike rate. Of course, he was, I'm sure, facing a lineup not full of major leaguers, but early, if you're looking for an early sign that's encouraging from Garrett Cole, who I think has been one of the hardest pitcher to rank, arguably the hardest pitcher to rank, because I just don't know who he is anymore. I would say this start was a very encouraging sign.
All right, Statcast data from Saturday's action. Casey Mize threw 3 hitless innings with 2 strikeouts. His splitter velocity was up 3.4 miles per hour compared to last year. Cade Povich of the Orioles, 3 shutout innings with 6 strikeouts. And after the start, Adley Rutschman said, quote, "Everyone knows how good he is, but comfortability and confidence have allowed Povich to start having success." I don't see a spot for Povich in the Orioles rotation, but he was a prospect of note, and obviously this was a great start. And Zach Gallen's velocity improved from his first to second start. It still was down a little bit, but it was up about a mile per hour compared to his first start. So helps any concerns if anyone had those on Zach Gallen. Scott, not as many names here, but Gallen, Povich, and Casey Mize on Saturday.
Yeah, Povich, I think they laid out exactly the pecking order for the rotation. 1 through 5 is set. And then Albert Suarez, who probably will begin in the bullpen, but he clocks in as number 6. And then Povich is number 7. Could Povich leapfrog Suarez with a good spring performance? Yes. I think he's beginning in the minors either way, barring an injury. But I believe, wasn't the changeup also the pitch that looked most impressive for him in this start? He worked on his changeup grift this offseason, Povich. And it might be something that helps bring his arsenal together. So probably beginning in the minors, but somebody to keep an eye on. I would say that goes double from the previous group. I meant to mention Zebby Matthews, who was an elite strike thrower in the minors. Just to give you he walked 7 batters in 97 innings last year between 3 minor league stops. 7 walks in 97 innings. And so seeing him miss all those bats this spring with the improved velocity, he might be able to sneak into the Twins rotation. They're less clear at the back end than the Orioles are. But Zebby Matthews, I think, even more than Cade Povich, needs to be on the radar as a deep sleeper.
All right, and then on Sunday, Statcast data, Christopher Sanchez's velocity has been way up in each of his first 2 spring starts. On Sunday, the sinker, changeup, and slider were all up over 2 miles per hour compared to last year. Calvin Faucher's velocity was down again, but it was an improvement from his first spring outing. So the fastball, cutter, curve were all down 2 miles per hour compared to last year. But in his first outing, I think they were down like over 3 miles per hour. So seems like it is slowly being built up. Robert Suarez allowed 4 runs while recording just 1 out, and his velocity was way down. Fastball down 2.5 miles per hour. Sinker and changeup both down over 3 miles per hour compared to last year. But relievers are a little bit tougher. I mean, Ryan Helsley usually starts slow, and then by the time we get to the season, he's fine.
I've noticed pretty consistently this spring, reliever, closer, those are the only relievers I'm really looking at, but closer velocities are down. Yeah. And so I'm guessing they just don't throw as much at the start of camp, and so they're not as far along in their ramp up process. But I'm not inclined to worry about any of them. Robert Suarez a little more worrisome because he had some issues in the second half with hitability. Leans a little too much on the fastball probably. So he's going to need his velocity, the full extent of it, I would imagine. But I'm not concerned to the point that I'm moving down my rankings yet.
All right, and no Statcast data, but these 2 were noteworthy on Sunday. Walker Buehler made his Red Sox debut through 2 shutout with 4 strikeouts, and Robbie Ray 3 shutout innings with 6 strikeouts, 0 walks as well. I think that is a big key there for Robbie Ray. And per Justice De Los Santos, who covers the Giants for the Mercury News, Robbie Ray touched 96 miles per hour multiple times and appeared to get a good amount of whiffs on this new changeup that he learned from Tarek Skubal. So I wish we had Statcast data for this game, these 2 games in particular, Scott, but 2 names to pay attention to and continue: Walker Buehler and Robbie Ray.
Yep. I would say Robbie Ray especially. I'm going to come out with my Sleepers 2.0 this week. I'm pretty sure Robbie Ray is going to be in it. I have been encouraged by what I've seen from him so far this spring. I was encouraged by what I saw from him for the short time he was back from Tommy John surgery last year. He regained his velocity from his 2021 Cy Young season, was missing a ton of bats. Seems to have continued into this spring. Walker Buehler, I want to see more. I want to see data for that. He's obviously has a great track record. Last year was more the exception than the rule, and we were blaming it on him being coming back from a second Tommy John and that he'd just never be the same again. But he showed signs in the postseason and, you know, by all accounts, looked good in this spring start. I think it's too early to really change my views on Buehler, but I'm keeping a close eye on it.
All right, not Statcast, but Junior Caminero had himself a 2-homer game on Sunday, and the hype continues to grow. He is going to be a name that we talk about as a big riser throughout the month of February. And in case you didn't know, you might have heard the sound drop a few times, but Scott released a banger this offseason highlighting Junior Caminero. We haven't played the full song since back in November or December, whenever this came out. But there's a lot more people watching and listening now that it's March. So here's the full song. Enjoy.
Can you name the Ray who hit that drive over the fence that makes 35? Caminero. Well, he's kind of slow, unlike Jackson Merrill, but he's lightning quick as compared to Will Ferrell. Caminero. Whoa. Caminero. Swings not long, zones not wide. A few practice hacks make pitchers want to hide. Caminero. Finally beating out all the utility sorts. Service time manipulation is matter for the courts. Caminero. Every ball off his bat's like a laser hot beam. He's a velo mash, bump and crash line, driving machine. Caminero. Ha, Caminero. Whoa, Caminero.
Awesome stuff there, Scott. Do you want to provide some context, some background? Because you'll do a better job than I will.
Well, if you didn't watch The Simpsons in its heyday, you might not get what that song is parodying. It's the Caminero, Caminero, the sport utility vehicle that Krusty the Clown was tasked with, promoting in the episode "The Last Temptation of Crust." So that was a song from that, but I decided to make it Caminero instead because that's what I always thought when I heard his name. I thought about that song,
and very relevant because so far this offseason we have gotten some big home runs from Junior Caminero. First, the Dominican Winter League finals, and then 2 homers here on Sunday. And he's a popular breakout candidate. We'll talk about him more in just a little bit. Got a few things that I want to promote. It's about that time. Fantasy Baseball Today listener leagues are coming. Here's what you need to know. There are 2 listener leagues. One is a 12-team head-to-head points league that will draft on Tuesday evening, March 25th. Time to be determined, but my guess is 8 p.m. Eastern time or later. Probably more realistic, 9 p.m. Eastern time. The other is a 16-team head-to-head categories league. That draft will be the next night, Wednesday evening, March 26th. If you want to participate in these drafts and compete against Scott, Chris, and myself, email something creative to fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. That's the letter I. fantasybaseball@cbsi.com. Sending something funny, a Photoshop, a song, a poem, a haiku, or just tell us why you deserve to be in one of the listener leagues. Tell us which one you want to be in and make sure that you actually have availability for the night that we are drafting. Make sure to put FBT Listener League in the email subject line, and I will announce the winners on Friday, March 21st. Good luck to all. Next up, we have a new draft day event that we are launching this year for the first time, and we are hoping to make this an annual event for Fantasy Baseball Today and our community of listeners and people who watch us here on YouTube. It's called Fantasy Baseball Today Mock Draft Mega Stream. What is this? An entire day of drafts. That's exactly what it is. We are going to live stream 5 drafts in a row. CBS, Yahoo, ESPN, Underdog, and NFBC. When is that happening? Thursday, March 13th, I believe. Start time will either be 3 or 4 p.m. Eastern time. We're probably looking at least an 8-hour live stream, I'd imagine. So 5 drafts in a row. If we need to fill time in between, we'll take your questions for those watching us live. So trying to make this kind of a fun new thing and help people regardless of where you play on CBS, ESPN, Yahoo, NFBC. It doesn't matter. More details to come, but it will be on Thursday, March 13th. So mark that on your calendars. Final break. When we return, we will finally talk about ADP risers and fallers right after this.
The clock never stops. Relive the greatest moments with uninterrupted highlights and more.
It's Gareth Bale. Ronaldo. Wonderful goal.
On the UEFA Champions League channel. Streaming free.
Welcome back in ADP risers and fallers throughout February. So here's what I did. I took NFBC ADP from January, then I took ADP from February. And there were 230 drafts in January, 208 in February. So some pretty big samples here. I just compared February and just whoever were the biggest risers and fallers. And we will start inside of the top 100 picks, Scott. And the 5 biggest risers: Anthony Santander up 12 spots from 94 to 82. Tyler Glasnow up 10 spots from 114 to 104. Junior Caminero up 10 spots from 87 to 77. Jordan Westberg up 9 spots from 85 to 76. And Pete Alonso up 8 spots from 54 to 46. So for Santander and Alonso, it's because they signed with teams, I assume, like Santander to the Blue Jays, Alonso back to the Mets.
It's this weird thing on NFBC where if a guy hasn't signed yet, there's this concern that he might never sign. It's, I don't know. I don't know why that always happens, but it's, if you do happen to play in those leagues, and not many people do, but it might make sense to sign up for one early just so you get to take advantage of those discounts. For the high-end free agents I'm talking about, obviously not like a JD Martinez you mentioned earlier, who legitimately may not sign. But Pete Alonso was going to have a team in 2025. It was never a question.
Mm-hmm. Tyler Glasnow, he's healthy for now. He's throwing in spring, so that's good news for him. Mentioned that he was up. The price for Caminero is getting steep here. I mean, I wrote him up as a breakout, but he's all the way up to 77th overall in February.
Yeah.
After a 2-homer game, probably
after the 2-homer game, after playing that song again, there's no way that price isn't coming down. It's unfortunate because I don't think I'm going to have any Junior Caminero. I'm excited about him. I think he very well could be a huge breakout player this year. But you're giving up some really bankable talent in that 70 to 80 range where he's now going. And, is it more likely Junior Caminero breaks out or Luis Robert bounces back? Because at this point, I mean, is Caminero going ahead of Robert? Did he go ahead of Robert in February?
Yeah, in February, it was Caminero at 77, Luis Robert at 80.
I don't know. I think I'd rather have Robert, and I'm not the biggest Robert fan, but like we've seen him produce at a stud level before. And Caminero, it's still theoretical. I'm hopeful. But he really has to live up to that price tag. You can't afford to get less than his best outcome. I mean, his best outcome is like Austin Riley, so he doesn't quite need to give you that, but he needs to give you a lot.
Who would you rather have, Scott, Caminero or Westberg? Because they are both on the rise and they're both going inside the top 80 picks now.
I think I'm gonna say Westberg. I know I rank Westberg higher, so I'm gonna say Westberg.
Mm-hmm. For the other names here, are you looking?
Am I high on Caminero or am I low on Caminero? I know it's confusing based on the last 10 minutes of this podcast. I guess relative to the consensus, I'm low. It's unfortunate.
Yeah. Well, you were high on him in the offseason, Scott, before you knew the top 80 pick or so in ADP. The other names here, Santander at 82, Glasnow at 104, Alonso at 46. Do those all sound okay and fair to be rising?
Yeah, I mean, Glasnow, remember last season ended with some concern over the elbow ligament. So I think people needed to see him coming back and looking like himself as he has so far this spring. And 104, that's probably lower than I have him. Yeah, it's definitely lower than I have him. So I think he could stand to go up more. It is weird that he's being drafted so much later than a year ago, when if he is healthy, as he appears to be, as he says he is, the facts on the ground really haven't changed. He's an injury-prone pitcher for the Dodgers who, for the time he's healthy, for however long he's healthy, is going to give you fantastic ratios that might be good enough to justify a much higher price than this. So I think he's a good value at 104.
Yeah. I think specifically in the NFBC, it's a little bit tougher because they don't have IL spots, but we've talked about this. If you play in leagues, 12-team head-to-head leagues or leagues that have IL spots, or both, if your 12-team head-to-head league has IL spots, then I think it's easier to take someone like Glass now because the replacement value is much better. And if he gets hurt, you just put him on the IL. But when he pitches, I still have confidence he's going to perform like a top 12-ish starting pitcher. Again, that's Tyler Glass now.
He's 83rd on Yahoo, so 20 spots higher than this.
Yeah, that makes sense. The biggest fallers in the top 100 throughout February, Roki Sasaki is down 16 spots from 86 to 102. Felix Bautista down 10 spots from 84 to 94. Mason Miller down 6 spots from 58 to 64. Ryan Helsley down 5 spots from 65 to 70. Andres Munoz down 4 spots from 92 to 96. The last 3 there, the closers, I think that's just a little market correction. The NFBC is pretty aggressive on closers. But the first 2 here, Scott, Sasaki down to 102 and Bautista down to 94. What do you think on those price tags? Would you be looking to buy a little bit of a dip there on either one, Sasaki and Bautista?
Everything I've read about Felix Bautista has been promising. I think they're not like 100% he's going to avoid an IL stint at the beginning of the season. I think the expectation, he needs to make 7 appearances this spring or something like that. So there's a concern that he may just not be quite all the way ready, but it doesn't sound like there are concerns about the way he's throwing the ball off of Tommy John surgery. I have him 119, so actually lower than where he's going. But as you mentioned, there tends to be a markup on closers in NFBC leagues. So I'm probably just in terms of how I evaluate him in line with consensus. Roki Sasaki, I wasn't sure it was going to play out this way. I thought there would be, since he signed with the Dodgers, and the Dodgers have a great reputation of player development, and of course look like the best team in baseball. So they're you generally want pitchers on better teams so they have a better chance of winning games. I thought that would prompt people to be more aggressive in drafting Roki Sasaki. They would view it as a good thing. And initially that did seem to be where it was landing, but I guess it's been talked through enough by people like me and other people in the industry that the Dodgers probably are, for his short-term value, one of the worst places he could have gone, because they have so many pitchers, and they mostly their goal with Roki Sasaki this year above anything else is preservation. They want him there for the games that matter most. They're obviously going to the playoffs no matter if he throws a single pitch for them during the regular season. So I'd be surprised if he got to 130 innings, to be honest. And I have him even lower than what he's dropped to because of that. I have him 137th.
Yeah, the projections on Fangraphs all have him for like 130 to 140 innings this season, 23 and 24 starts respectively for those projections. That's probably okay. 130 to 140 range. I could, see something like that for Sasaki, but even with him falling in NFBC ADP in February, Sasaki's still going ahead of Tyler Glasnow, Luis Castillo, Max Fried, Hunter Green, Logan Webb in the month. And I think both you and I would agree that that's still too high for Sasaki.
Fried is insane, going ahead of Fried. But a Glasnow, that doesn't really make sense either, because I imagine the workload issues for them are similar. I mean, if Roki Sasaki's as good as Glasnow inning per inning, that is like a best case scenario performance wise. I don't think I don't think you should assume that. I think it's very much he could be anything. He can even be Tyler Glasnow situation, to borrow Chris's expression.
Yeah. The biggest risers in the top 200, so the 100 to 200 range in NFBC ADP. Carlos Estevez is up 50 spots from 257 to 207. He did sign with the Royals late in January, January 29th, but he's now dealing with a back injury. There was a story on MLB.com. Mentioned that last week that Lucas Erceg could have the highest leverage spots throughout the game. Jeff Hoffman is up 25 spots from 176 to 151. Jurickson Profar up 24 spots from 196 to 172. Tanner Scott up 24 spots from 178 to 154. And Spencer Strider up 17 spots from 139 to 122. Scott, any names here that I realize I said in the top 200 and Estevez is here at 207. So I'm cheating a little bit, but are there any names here that in particular you agree or disagree either way with them rising in ADP?
I agree with all of them, but I want to pump the brakes a little bit on Carlos Estevez now, not just because of the injury, but because it's being talked about among Royals beat writers as if it's more of a committee situation between him and Lucas Erceg than just Estevez outright being the closer. And we got even something more I guess working against it. It works against Estevez, this report from their MLB.com writer suggesting that Erceg will be the highest leverage guy regardless of the inning. Generally speaking, you tend to think though pitchers in that role will work the ninth inning more than any other inning. So will the back injury potentially just push Erceg into the closer role outright? That doesn't seem implausible. I think I am at the point now where I would draft Erceg ahead of Estevez. I think he's the better pitcher, and he's clearly going to be in a better situation at the start of the year. And he may just never give it up. So that doesn't mean I'm drafting him as high as I was before the Estevez signing, but I'm drafting him higher than Estevez. As for Hoffman, yeah, most of these guys, it's just they signed, and so they moved up. Like I said, always happens on NFBC. Jeff Hoffman, Jurickson Profar, Tanner Scott, they all signed late in January. And I think they signed in scenarios that are good for them, except maybe Scott, who could face more threats for having save opportunities vultured from him with the Dodgers than he might have with other teams. But they have said he is the favorite for saves going in, the guy they're mainly looking at for the ninth inning going in. So 154 doesn't seem like a high cost relative to other closers in NFBC. It doesn't seem like too high of a cost. Strider, I have him in my top 100, so him inching up to 122, I think makes sense. I'm on board with that. But yeah, late April probably for his return.
Did want to bring up three honorable mentions that are also rising in the 100 to 200 range. Mike Trout up 14 picks to 107. Alex Bregman up 14 picks to 121. And Ishak Paredes up 11 picks to 179. For Trout, I guess it's just because he's healthy for now. I don't really see another reason that he'd be rising. Bregman to Boston, obviously a great place for his swing and just a good landing spot, a great lineup to be in. And I think some market correction on Paredes, but still not high enough at 179. So any thoughts on these prices, Scott? Mike Trout at 107, Bregman 121, and Paredes at 179.
So I've always been high on Paredes. He was one of the players I love from the Valentine's Day episode. 179 is getting higher. I still have him 130. So you still got a ways to go to catch up to me. And honestly, the same thing's true with Bregman. I do think he could have landed in some venues that really risked crushing his fantasy value, but clearly Boston wasn't one of them. Short of returning to Houston, it was the best place he could have gone. And in fact, it may actually be better than Houston because of the batting average he figures to gain, banging so many balls off that green monster. Bold prediction, I think Bregman's going to have a career-high batting average this year. And so I am eager to draft him at his going rate, if not earlier. Like I said, I have him 81.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, career-high batting average, you say, Scott?
Yeah.
We're going to put this to the test. He hit 296 back in 2019.
I think he could hit over 300 in Boston. It's a bold prediction. Like, I'm not willing to guarantee it, but I don't think hearing that doesn't really back me down from that bold prediction.
Yeah. Bregman typically in the 260 range, but yeah, I could see him getting up over 275, 280, something like that for Bregman this upcoming season. The biggest fallers in the 100 to 200 range, Trevor McGill is down 25 spots from 143 to 168. Shane Baz down 14 spots from 189 to 203. Robert Suarez down 12 spots from 108 to 120. Ceddanne Rafaela down 10 spots from 176 to 186. And Robbie Ray down 9 picks from 166 to 175. That is going to reverse course, because the way Robbie Ray has looked and this talk of him learning a changeup from Tarek Skubal, I have no doubt that the ADP is going to go the other way, and it's probably going to climb back up here, Scott. But are you looking to buy on any of these players falling? McGill, Baz, Suarez, Rafaela, Ray, or do you maybe agree that they should be falling?
Suarez, I understand. And I mean, 120 is still pretty early for a closer, so I don't think it's crazy how much he's fallen. But yeah, I think it makes sense that people are taking a second look at him and are a little wary. He's not maybe as bankable as he seemed just looking at his overall numbers last year. Trevor McGill, I'm not with it at all. The drop of 25 spots, I already thought he was kind of undervalued at 143. And I hope, like, as somebody who tends to go really cheap at closer, even in those deeper rotisserie leagues, I kind of hope he doesn't rise back up, because I like being able to bank on Trevor McGill that late in the draft. I think it's just because he had that undisclosed injury in spring training, which who knows what it could have been. Maybe he was just really sick or something. I don't know. He's back pitching though, and is clearly the favorite for saves there. And based on what he showed us last year, I think he'll do fine in that role. He might have a better season than Robert Suarez. Who knows? So definitely not on board with him falling. Happy that he is falling though. And I'll say the same for Robbie Ray, who, as I said, probably is getting added to my Sleepers 2.0 here. I have Ceddanne Rafaela as a bust. I am kind of concerned about Shane Baz, because he just hasn't, returning from Tommy John surgery, he didn't show the same bite on that slider, did not miss bats at a particularly high rate. And I've seen no evidence so far this spring that's a short-term phenomenon. Seems like he might just be a different pitcher now. He may figure out a way to succeed without it, but kind of a guessing game what Shane Baz is actually going to be.
All right, the biggest risers in the top 350 in February ADP. Ryan Presley is up 206 spots from 414 to 208. He was traded to the Cubs on January 28th. Max Scherzer up 94 spots from 401 to 307. Grant Holmes is up 60 spots from 366 to 306. Kenley Jansen up 42 spots from 249 to 207. And Jonathan Aranda, Scott, your boy, up 40 spots from 355 to 315. Are there any names here that you disagree with moving up quite a bit? Presley at 208, Scherzer up to 307, Grant Holmes up to 306, Kenley Jansen up to 207, and Jonathan Aranda up to 315.
No, I think I'm on board with all of them. And I think the main reason they're moving up is because they're getting talked up by people like us. And, Holmes certainly has gotten a lot of attention on this podcast and others. Jonathan Aranda, I've been talking about him for years at this point. Max Scherzer, I feel like recently we've kind of began to build buzz for him again. Just being reminded that he's still dominated on an inning per inning basis, still missed a lot of bats. So it wasn't as clear of a decline as for Verlander. I don't know that I'd want to draft him much inside the top 300. So it's getting to a perilous point because of the injury risk. But yeah, I'm happy to take him at the price he's going for now. And then obviously Presley and Jansen, now they're in line to be closers, and that wasn't clear prior to February.
A couple honorable mentions here that are also rising. Clay Holmes is up 37 picks from up to 281. Jackson Jobe is up 21 picks to 265. I mentioned this on our last podcast. I'm currently in an NFBC slow draft. Clay Holmes went 217 in this draft, and in NL LABR this weekend, Clay Holmes went for, I think, $13 or something, $12. So
I got him for 9 in the CBS NL only auction.
I know the ADP says 281 in February. I think that number is a lot higher. I think Clay Holmes is like close to 200 now, if you really want to get him.
Well, I mean, we do have data since February. If you want to take a peek at that. I don't know if that throws off your whole methodology here. 21 drafts from February 28th on. Let's do that. 235.
Okay.
Not quite there, but moving up. And if he continues to perform well this spring, I imagine that trend will continue.
And the biggest fallers in the top 300, Lucas Urseg down 100 spots from 145 to 245. We talked about that. Maybe a bit of a buying opportunity there. Kirby Yates down 53 spots from 163 to 216. Keibert Ruiz down 13 from 194 to 207. Trevor Story down 11 from 254 to 265. Tyler Fitzgerald down 10 spots from 234 down to 244. Scott, are you looking to maybe pounce on any of these fallers? Lucas Urseg, Kirby Yates, Keibert Ruiz, Trevor Story, Tyler Fitzgerald.
Urseg, if based on what I said a minute ago, I'm going to move him up some and Estevez down. I imagine I won't be the only one doing that, so I don't know that he's going to continue to go in the 245 range for long. I think I wish Yates was a little bit cheaper. I could see Yates dropping to a point where I'm excited to take him because I think there's a good chance he vultures a dozen saves or more. So deep roto league, not everybody's going to have use for a guy like that, but in deep roto leagues, you do. Tyler Fitzgerald, I think the price is okay. He's a big mystery box, Tyler Fitzgerald, because it doesn't make any sense how he performed like he did last year. So I get it. I get being scared off from him. But he did that throughout his minor league career too. Certainly the last couple years in the minors, he performed in spite of really ugly strikeout rates and exit velocity readings. And I don't know, there just may be something we're all missing. And I think I'm not eager to draft him at 244, just inside the top 250 there, but I'm okay with it. Particularly if I need if I need speed for sure. If I need speed from a middle infielder, I'm definitely okay with it.
Yeah. Kirby Yates, the price there, I mentioned 216 in February ADP. I mentioned I'm in that slow draft that's going on right now, 15-team roto, and I got him all the way down at 253. So there are drafts where Kirby Yates could slip a little bit. I took Mason Miller early on in this draft as my first closer, and then I waited from there, but it felt like late enough to take a shot. Kirby Yates at 253, and then I think I took a Aroldis Chapman like 3 rounds later. So those are my 3 relievers so far, and going to continue to build out that depth. All right, we're going to go a little bit longer here on this podcast because I do want to talk about these labor drafts a little bit. And for those drafting in AL and NL only leagues, just give you a little bit of a sense of what Chris and I were trying to do in our respective drafts this weekend. And so we're going to, like I said, go a little bit longer here. But labor auction recaps, the League of Alternative Baseball Reality. I participated in the NL only. Chris was in the AL only, and there are obviously other great players, people from all around the industry that were playing in these leagues with us as well. Some unique rules. The players you draft basically have to stay in your lineup. You can only bench a player if they go on the IL, they get demoted, or you have to drop that player if you want to get them out of your lineup. A $260 standard size budget. For my draft, I spent 67% on hitting, 33% on pitching. The goal was to play the middle of the draft, Scott. And we've talked about this. Mm-hmm. The deeper you go into a particular draft format, maybe spreading that money out and getting some higher floor players, guys that you think are going to get some playing time. So, yeah. I mean, I really, really leaned into it. I did not get a single player over $25. I executed the plan to perfection. Now we're going to find out if that plan was the correct plan. I don't know if that was the correct plan, but at least for me, that's what I wanted to do. And that's what I achieved in doing so.
Yeah. So just to elaborate on that a little bit, we talk sometimes about how the waiver wire is scarce in 15-team roto leagues. Well, if you're doing 12-team roto league with half the player pool, only AL or only NL, that's more like a 24-team roto league, right? So that it's that much deeper, which is to say it doesn't exist. You can get some relievers off the waiver wire, and of course, occasionally there will be a call up or something that nobody had rostered already. But like what you draft is basically your roster. And so just getting playing time from every spot is a big part of this. And so what you're saying about not wanting to no, this is definitely not the format to go studs and duds, because you want to spend like I don't know, like at least $5 on every position. If you get down to the $2-3 range in an AL or NL only league, it's very likely that's just going to be a black hole in your lineup. Somebody who doesn't contribute much of anything. Doesn't always work out that way, but you certainly can't trust in it. So I've found that you said you didn't want to spend more than 25. I try not to go 30. And we do. I don't play in labor, but I run the CBS AL and NL only auctions. If you want to review those, you can find them on the site. We did NL last week. We did AL the week before, and you can compare those prices to these. There are some similarities. There are some differences, but I play in those every year, and I found the same thing when I distribute my dollars more evenly. Doesn't have to be perfectly evenly. It doesn't have to be $14 on every roster spot. I wouldn't advise that. But if you go too big on any one player, it's kind of hard to fill out your roster the way you need to.
All right. So for those watching us here on YouTube, I'm going to pull up the draft board so you can just check this out. It is a little bit tougher to see just because there are a lot of names and colors and lots of things going on here. But reading off my hitters first, I did pay up for catchers. I got Sean Murphy and Tyler Stevenson, $12 each. Michael Busch for $9. Tyro Estrada for $12. Mason Wynn for $19. Austin Riley for $25. Otto Lopez for $12. Josh Bell for $7. Seiya Suzuki for $21. Tommy Edman for $18. Lars Nootbaar for $11. Max Kepler for $5. Zach Veen for $1. And Jamer Candelario for $10. The one that stands out, Zach Veen for $1. I don't know if he's going to be on the opening day roster. He's looked good in spring so far, but he is on a 40-man roster for the Rockies. I think if he continues to play well in spring, maybe he is on their opening day roster. And like I mentioned, this unique format, if one of your players gets demoted, you can actually take that player out of your lineup. So in the reserve rounds, I grabbed a few outfielders, guys that are probably not going to play very much, but that does allow me some flexibility, even if Zach Veen does not make the opening day roster. Scott, what do you think of the way I put together the offense here?
I was wondering about speed at first, though. I am reminded Mason Wynn has set a goal of stealing 40 bases, and I'm counting on him being a much bigger base stealer this year. It's just you got him and you got Tyro Estrada at second. Tyro Estrada stole 1 or 2 bases last year, but of course we're hoping he bounces back. It's a lot of hoping at stolen base, right? Between Mason Wynn and Tyro Estrada and Zach Veen making the roster, and then you got Otto Lopez there, who is.
I think Lopez could give 20. I think Edman could give 25 plus, something like that. So,
yeah, I like that seems like a good outfield. I like the way you distributed your dollars in the outfield. Of course, Veen may end up being a waste, but it's hard to get all 5 outfield spots filled with somebody bankable. I would have probably distributed those catcher dollars elsewhere. And just looking at some of the catcher costs, like JT Realmuto went for 13.
That was a good buy.
Which is one more. Yeah, that was the best. Like I've tried, like I'm trying to do something different this year where instead of kind of planning out my roster before the auction, I'm going to try to just wait to see what the best values I can get and lock those in first and then work around those. And so I'm hoping to be the guy who takes advantage of the JT Realmuto. Obviously, you can't take advantage of every value because there are more values than can fit in one budget usually. But I don't know, $24 in a league where it's this deep, where it's this difficult to fill every spot. I probably would have maybe gotten one of those catchers and just gone really cheap for the second catcher spot, like a Carson Kelly. I see who went for $1. He's probably going to get a decent number of at-bats for the Cubs. And then maybe I could have used those Tyler Stevenson savings to get like I see Marcell Ozuna went for 20. So if I could upgrade from Candelario to Ozuna at DH and go with the super cheap second catcher, easy for me to say in retrospect, but I think I'm a little worried about this offense, and that would relieve some of my worries.
Yeah, no, there were a few good buys throughout the draft that I felt the same way about. Like Ozzy Albies going for 21. I thought that was a great price. Realmuto you brought up for 13. Yeah. I kind of regretted not going an extra buck on one of those guys and just kind of rearranging the plan. Marcell Ozuna for 20. I definitely was thinking about being in on that as well. So I totally hear you. I did look at the winner from last year. He had 2 good catchers on this team. In the first 2 years I competed in this format, my second catcher was always bad, like really bad, like $1 or $2 players. And it just felt like more of a detriment than anything. So I wanted a better second catcher. I think maybe I could have gotten away with like a Keibert Ruiz for 9 or Herrera for 8 and maybe got some savings there. But I totally get what you're saying. Well, I haven't done this before in a format like this, so I guess we'll see if it works out, paying up for 2 good catchers. Yep. On the pitching side of things, I wound up with Dylan Cease for $25, then Sonny Gray for 16, Jesus Luzardo for 11, Kyle Finnegan for 9, Merrill Kelly for 8, Grant Holmes for 5, Jason Adam for 5, Quinn Matthews for 4, and Calvin Fauché for 3. So a little bit of background here. In this draft last year, I got David Bednar for 20, and obviously that did not work out. But instead of just paying up for one closer and then taking a few $1 spec shots, I figured let me kind of divvy it up a little bit more and see if Kyle Finnegan can give me 25 or 20 plus saves again, or if Calvin Fauché is the closer for the Marlins, maybe that works out, or if Robert Suarez just implodes, maybe Jason Adam takes over as the closer there. And the starting pitchers, I think it was like an okay distribution. It wasn't the exact names that I was looking to get, but in terms of just like SP1, SP2, SP3, SP4, I think it turned out okay. What do you think, Scott?
I really like what you did with saves. That is a very tricky category in formats this deep because, I always have a hard time paying for saves, and there's just no way around it when there are only 15 closer possibilities out there, in an NL-only league. And I find I usually budget 15 for a closer, and I really have to go 16 or 17, and I just don't prepare myself for that. And so sometimes I get left out altogether. In my NL-only league, I just committed, okay, I'm going to spend 17 on a closer, and I got Ryan Walker for 17. But you got here 2 presumed closers in Kyle Finnegan and Calvin Fauché for a combined $12. And I think that's the way to do it. If you can get them for that low, in my league, Fauché went for 8 instead of 3. That seems great. And Finnegan went for 11 instead of 9. So you got a good deal on those 2. And the thing is, if they stick in the closer role, which certainly isn't a given. They're among the worst relievers in that role. But Finnegan, we've seen do it for a couple years now. And Fauché, who else do the Marlins have? If they stick in the closer, you might win saves. You might win saves just because you happen to have 2 of those guys. Well, everybody else has at most 1. There's probably somebody else with 2. But you know what I mean? There's definitely not enough for every team or even most teams to have 2. So I think that was good. I think overall, I wonder if you have enough starting pitching depth. I like the start there with Cease and Gray. And Luzardo's look good this spring. Hopefully he bounces back beyond that. I don't know that we can count on Merrill Kelly anymore. I like Grant Holmes as a sleeper, but I don't know that I totally confident he's going to stick in the rotation.
That's fair. Yeah.
And then beyond those 4, there's nobody you can count on.
I mean, Bailey Falter, Scott, come on. I did wind up with Quinn Matthews here, as I mentioned earlier, unique format where if someone gets demoted, it gives you a little bit more flexibility to put another pitcher in your lineup. So I drafted Quinn Matthews knowing that he will not be in my opening day lineup, and I'm just hoping for him to be up by like May or June and make an impact from that point on. I have to fill him in with like Bailey Falter or Bobby Miller in the meantime. This is a league that allows trades, so potentially could be looking to make some trades there at some point this season. That was my NL only team. I am going to pull up Chris's AL LABR team real quick, and we'll take a look at that just to see how he.
I'll just criticize that too. I don't have to put my team up. I just get to criticize yours.
Yes, you are. That is your role. So you are the judge and the jury. And speaking of Judge, Chris Towers wound up with Aaron Judge on his team. He spent 59% of his budget on hitting, 41% on pitching. And once you see it, you'll notice. I mean, this is a pretty strong pitching staff here for Chris. So at catcher, he did go bottom of the barrel.
Well, this will be interesting because he did what we didn't want to do. He spent a ton of money on one player, and so we'll see if the lower end players give him enough to justify that move.
At catcher, he has Christian Vasquez for 2 and Kyle Teal for 1, Seth Brown for 3, Will Wagner for 2, Jacob Wilson for 10, Jose Miranda for 3, Marcelo Mayer for 2, Gio Urshela for 3, Aaron Judge for 46, Anthony Santander for 24, Mike Trout for 24, Randy Arozarena for 21, JJ Bleday for 10, Harrison Bader for 2. So he wound up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 players, 8 hitters in his lineup that are $3 or less. But I mean, the outfield is tremendous. Like maybe that could just carry him. He also needs Mike Trout to stay healthy, which is, not a shift.
Yeah. That's the thing. I think if you're buying Judge, if you're committing that much to one player in a league this deep, you gotta treat the rest of your draft like that first chapter in Moneyball, where it didn't make it to the movie, but if you read the book, it was like the A's draft from that year, and they didn't want to take a risk on anybody. They wanted to make sure they hit all their picks, so it was just super, super, super safe. That was like when they got Nick Swisher or whatever that year of the draft. Anyway, that's how I think you need to play it. And Trout is not somebody I would have gone for unless it was at an obvious discount. 24 doesn't seem like that. He went for 18 in the CBS AL only league for what it's worth. So yeah, I just don't have enough confidence in him staying healthy to invest that much capital in him after already dumping so many into Judge. So that would be my biggest critique. Krista actually did pretty well here to fill out his lineup with players who are going to play. Second catcher, Kyle Teal. Okay, it might be a while before he plays. Marcelo Mayer. He said he was trying to get somebody to bid 3 on him, and he kind of got caught with taking Mayer as his middle infielder. So those spots are clearly problems. And a lot of these players are they're in line for platoon roles, probably. Seth Brown, Will Wagner, Harrison Bader. Then there's somebody like Gio Urshela in the corner infield spot. He may not be good enough to hold on to a starting role all season just because he's starting out there. So I'm not confident it's going to go right, but I think Chris gave himself a chance with the hitters he managed to slot in around Judge there.
All right, and then I mentioned he spent more money on pitching than I did, and up top he's got Josh Hader at $24, George Kirby at $22, Grayson Rodriguez at $19, Yusei Kikuchi at $10, Max Scherzer at $8, Lucas Erceg at $8, Jackson Jobe at $7, Edwin Uceta at $5, Cody Bradford at $4. So the pitching staff, I think it looks awesome. I mean, he's got a top-tier closer. He might have a second closer in Lucas Erceg. If P. Fairbanks can't stay healthy and the velocity remains down, like maybe Edwin Uceta gets saves as well. And the starters look really good too. And I mentioned this is a trading league. So if most likely Chris winds up with a strength on the pitching side, he could, maybe trade 1 or 2 pitchers for hitters throughout the season.
Yeah, so your fourth starter was Grant Holmes.
It was Merrill Kelly. Or, I mean, if you like Grant Holmes more, maybe he's SP4. But yeah, I viewed it as like Merrill Kelly as my SP4.
Okay, so Grant Holmes was 5.
Yeah.
Okay, so he's like a starting pitcher deeper here because he's got Kirby, Grayson, Kikuchi, Scherzer, Job, and Bradford. So he's got 6 that I think are going to be more or less good. Obviously, Scherzer, he may not stay healthy. Maybe Jackson Job doesn't pan out, spend some time in the minors. There's never going to be a scenario where it all works out, but he's given himself, I think, a little bit of a buffer there. And saves shouldn't be an issue just by virtue of having Hader. If Urseg and Uceta spend any time in the closer role, he gives himself a chance of winning that category, just like you did, but in a different way. What did he spend up between those 3? He spent 24 on Hader alone, and then Uceta was 5, Urseg was 8. So, he spent 37, you spent 13. I'd rather spend 13, but it's good. It's good to have a lot of something, and he has a lot of saves there, seemingly. So I feel a lot better about Chris's pitching staff than the hitter side for sure.
Yeah, and it makes sense because, as I mentioned, 41% of his budget here throughout the auction was devoted to pitching. So I think it's a pretty cool juxtaposition looking at my approach versus Chris's, because he was much more aggressive on Aaron Judge and paying up for that top player, and he also spent a lot more money on pitching than I did, and I kind of lived in the middle. So 2 different approaches to AL and NL only drafts. Let us know in the comments who you think did it better between Chris and I in our labor drafts this weekend. But that's going to do it. We are going to wrap there. For Scott, I am Frank. Thanks as always for tuning in to Fantasy Baseball Today. Please make sure to follow and leave a 5-star rating on Apple or Spotify, and we will be back again tomorrow. Bye-bye.